Hey there everyone, it's me once again. It's finally time for the last review in the Ratchet Clank-a-thon. It's been fun, but we've reached the last game I intend to cover in this series, at least for right now. It's possible that one day I'll come back to the series and cover the PS3 games, but not right now. I haven't played them yet, so doing videos on them would take a bit too long when I have other things I may do over the summer instead. Regardless, in the last video I covered Ratchet & Clank Size Matters for PSP and PS2. I don't think I have to say it by this point, but I think that game is a train wreck. By far the worst game in the Ratchet series that I've covered so far, and one of the worst games I've reviewed on this channel. The game had numerous problems brought on by pure bad design decisions, such as the horribly written story, the weak sauce weapons that do barely any damage even at max level, enemies that kill you in only a few hits, crappy Clank minigames that replace the traditional arena system, the worst final boss in gaming history, and a lot of padding and awful minigames. Plainly put, I thought Size Matters was a really bad game, and not because of compromises from being on a handheld, though there was a little bit of that sprinkled on top. PS2 version was actually an improvement over the original, with a higher resolution and better controls, but still bad because, as I said, the issues with Size Matters were on a fundamental level. By this point, Insomniac was hard at work developing the series' next major step, so High Impact Games was contracted again to handle another Ratchet & Clank game on the PSP. This one would be a bit different, as it would be a whole game designed around Clank, sort of like how Ratchet Deadlock focused solely on Ratchet. However, before I throw up in my mouth imagining an entire game being one of those boring Clank sections, there's a twist. The game would supposedly be based on the in-universe fictional series Secret Agent Clank, which, if you need a reminder, was a huge plot element from Up Your Arsenal. Honestly, on its face, that doesn't sound like a bad idea. The Agent Clank Holovision series was a really funny element of that game, and led to some poignant satire about celebrity culture and the like. A whole game focused on that could be a fun ride in its own right, especially if it plays up the angle they were going for with it in Ratchet 3. It could have commentary on the dark side of Hollywood, hack fraud movie productions that become blockbusters anyway, and things like that. The whole idea just sounds like an instant win. However, things wouldn't quite play out this way. The aptly named Secret Agent Clank would release on the PSP in 2008 and would be ported to PS2 the next year, just like Size Matters was. While the initial critic reviews were mixed to positive, this game would gradually experience a paradigm shift, shall we say. Its reputation would begin to falter, and the conversation surrounding the game would change from somewhat mixed to quite negative. Among the Ratchet & Clank fanbase, this remains one of the most infamous games in the series. Conversely, the game does have a group of people willing to stick their necks out and defend it, just like Size Matters. For me personally, I had heard legends of this game through the grapevine, that it was supposedly awful, with bad gameplay and a confusing mess of a plot, among several other things. Still, as with any game, I was still willing to give Secret Agent Clank a fair chance and come to my own conclusion. I eventually picked up the PS2 version last summer, and on one morning in July I dug into it. I don't remember too much from that initial exposure, but what I can say is, it sure wasn't pleasant. I think I even wrote up a script complaining about the game, and I uploaded a video making fun of every aspect of it. With that said, I still came into this video with an open mind, because hey, it was entirely possible I was just making mountains out of molehills. So let's dive right into the game and see if it was really as bad as I thought. Okay, here we are, Secret Agent Clank. Wow, that menu is really lame, especially when you consider how all the previous games had these neat scenes of Ratchet & Clank going about their daily business and whatnot. In this game, it's like they looked up Secret Agent Clank on DeviantArt, and after scrolling through they came across this and said, fuck it. But whatever, that's a nitpick. Let's go into the options so I can turn on widescreen and progressive scan just like the other games, and wait a minute. Where's the progressive scan option? There's widescreen here, so what gives? Well, I'm sorry to say, but this game is one of the many PS2 games that doesn't have 480p. We're back to Ratchet 1 territory, but at least that game released in 2002, so the fact it's in 480i is a little more excusable. The PS2 version of this game came out in 2009, so the fact that it's only 480i is pretty incompetent to say the least. Well, like I said in the Ratchet 1 video, interlaced resolutions don't automatically ruin a game, so let's get into it. Oh shit, what was I doing? Oh yeah. What the hell is going on right now? Why is the game taking so long to load? Did this game just crash on the first load? Oh my Jesus, no way. The loading screens are that long? Okay, drop the bullshit. You know exactly what that was. As with the last game, Secret Agent Clank was ported to the PlayStation 2, and as such, that version is the most widely accessible one. Most of the people coming out and saying how bad they think the game is played that version, meaning the obvious happened. That Agent Clank defense squad I mentioned earlier, if you will, they pulled out the same talking point as Size Matters defenders, claiming that all the issues with these people encountered were because of a bad porting job, not because of the original game, and that the PSP original doesn't suffer from any of the problems. In fact, on that aforementioned video where I made fun of the game, I got one such comment saying that I should play the PSP version because it allegedly doesn't have the same issues. And you know what? To be fair, I actually do think there is a slight kernel of truth to these claims, at least more so than there was for Size Matters. In some ways, the PS2 version of this game actually does change some things for the worse. As you just saw, the game doesn't support progressive scan, which is already pretty bad for a 2009 game, even on a console with such low 480p support. Also, you saw those loading screens. They're even longer than Sonic 06, and no exaggeration, go on for nearly a minute each. On top of that, the game often loads during the main levels, and no matter what situation you're in, it's always that same ugly scene of a random ship flying through outer space.png. I didn't bring it up in the last reviews because there wasn't a natural spot to, but the loading screens would always show you traveling to your next destination. They paid attention to the details too, even down to what ship you flew in or whether or not you were even in a ship. In this game though, no such luck, which comes off as really lazy in budget, as if the abysmal graphics themselves didn't already take care of that. This port was done by Sanzaru Games, the same people behind such classics as Mystery Case Files and the Malgrave Incident, Ninja Reflex. Does anyone remember that iconic classic? They made the Sonic Boom games in 3DS. Okay, if you didn't know, Sanzaru isn't exactly reputable for making quality products. Their most notable works are the Sly Collection, Sly 4, and the version of Spyro 3 in the Reignited trilogy, none of which are particularly highly regarded as far as I know. They were called on to port Secret Agent Clank to PS2, and needless to say, they botched the job pretty badly. And yes, the PSP version does have its advantages, like much shorter loads that actually fit the correct in-game context, a better looking main menu, and more. It's also in progressive scan too, because the PSP games are that by default. Just thought I'd mention that. Again though, can you really blame most people? Many of them are unaware this game even came out on PSP originally. So is it really entirely their fault if they play the game on PS2 not knowing any better? However, remember that commenter I mentioned? Well, you know what? I took their advice. For this review, I once again busted out the PSP emulator and got an ISO obtained from a legally ambiguous source, so I can play the original version of the game and see if it really was any better there fundamentally, like some people seem to claim. The PS2 port does suffer from a couple exclusive flaws, but were this game's supposed core problems there to begin with? Well, I assume you read the title of this review, so you can probably tell what I think of this game, but let's get into it anyways. As soon as you hit New Game, the problems begin. We open on Agent Clank sneaking into a museum. He's evidently been tasked with stopping the museum from being robbed of the Eye of Infinity, some mystical gemstone with special properties, I guess. It's revealed that the culprit behind the heist is none other than Ratchet, the same hero who's saved the galaxy more than once in the previous games, who gets sent to prison without any trial or objections whatsoever. Clank is evidently in disbelief that that was his best friend, but his secretary named Cute Anastasia Bot confirms via a retinal scan that it was in fact Ratchet. The news even confirms that yes, it was indeed the galactic hero Ratchet that was caught at the crime scene. It's only the first cutscene in the game and we've already run into a huge problem. So do you remember how I brought up that this game is supposedly based on the in-universe Secret Agent Clank Holovision series? It may seem that way to some, but the devil's in the details here. In Up Your Arsenal, Secret Agent Clank was in-universe fiction, in which Clank played the role of a secret agent and Ratchet was his incompetent chauffeur named Jeeves. This game, on the other hand, is running with the premise of the real Ratchet being the one who was present at the crime scene, the intergalactic hero who saved numerous lives during Drek's terrorism, the Protopet incident, the galactic war against Nefarious, and the collapse of Dread Zone. This is a complete contradiction of previous events, since if this was an episode of the show, it would have been Jeeves that was caught stealing the Eye of Infinity, not real-life Ratchet. Additionally, while in prison, Ratchet meets up with several faces from his past, including the plumber and Thugs for Less leader. If this were taking place in the fictional Agent Clank universe, these guys wouldn't even exist in their current form. But this game says fuck that and plops them in there anyway, even though doing so entirely contradicts what was previously established. Not to mention, Quark is present in this game too, and his entire purpose is to take credit for stories that Agent Clank supposedly took part in, that he made up for this weird bot that's following him around. If this were an episode of the show, well, for starters, Quark wouldn't even be in it, but even if he was, it doesn't make any sense that he would sign on to act as a pathetic loser that has to make up nonsense stories to be taken seriously. If the Quark from previous games was asked if he wanted to act on Secret Agent Clank as a loser, he'd probably punch the guy who asked him right in the face and flatly refuse. His entire character was focused on building a false heroic image, to the extent that he went out of his way to endanger a galaxy to accomplish this goal. So it makes no sense that he would agree to act in the show as such a washed up douche, especially when he knows very well how popular and widely viewed the series is. These things may hint at the game not being an episode of the series, but that causes issues too. If it isn't one, then how is Clank a secret agent like he was in the show? You mean to tell me that Clank has all this free time to be with Ratchet, but is also a secret agent tasked with carrying out numerous stealthy missions throughout the galaxy? You could say he became an agent off screen, but that wouldn't make any sense either. While I haven't played the games that come after the classic era of this series, I am aware of their plots enough to know that Clank isn't an agent in any of them, even to this day. So if he actually was one in real life, he just suddenly got trained to be one off screen, then immediately quit the job after this game was over? Yeah, I'm not buying that one. That would have been a colossal waste of time and resources just to become an agent, especially when Clank knows for a fact that more bad things can happen in the galaxy at any moment, just to immediately drop the position anyways. However, what I just said was totally unnecessary, because there is one, and I do literally mean one, line of dialogue from Ratchet 3 that totally eliminates any possibility of this game being in-universe fiction or reality.
I believe there has been a misunderstanding. Secret Agent Clank is merely a fictional character I play on the horror video.
Yep, there you go, explained by the man himself. The entire premise of Ratchet 3 was based around Agent Clank being fictional. In fact, people in that game confuse Clank for his fictional counterpart, to the point that he has to make it abundantly clear that it's just a persona he plays for a fictional series. I feel like I've said the word fictional right now more than I ever had my entire life, but seriously, this game's story crumbles if you think about it even a little bit. Some people may point out that this tweet from Insomniac supposedly confirming that the game is canon, but it reads more like some random intern who isn't familiar with the series is writing it, rather than the CEO Ted Price himself or someone like that. I personally have my own interpretation of what this game's story could possibly be, but I'll save that for later. But those aren't the only issues with this plot. No. Not one thing in this entire game feels natural in the slightest, and pretty much every event that takes place is beyond forced. Take the opening itself, for example. Clank just conveniently shows up when the crime is taking place, and in the right spot to see that Ratchet was apparently the culprit in person. Additionally, the Eye of Infinity is nowhere to be seen, so Ratchet evidently showed up after the crime was already committed, but the authorities treat it as if he was the one stealing the gem and arrest him anyways. Ratchet going to prison is also forced as hell. I mean, shouldn't these people be questioning this whole scenario? Ratchet is pretty well known throughout the galaxy as being a hero, even to the point that he was one of the targets of Dreadzone and Ratchet Deadlocked. Is there really any room for these people not to be at least a little skeptical that he was really up to no good, or at least up to no good out of his own volition? I mean, for God's sake, Ratchet is even seen on the news with these obvious red things on his forehead, so it doesn't make sense that no one would question this being a scheme of some sort, maybe involving mind control, and just immediately send Ratchet to prison with no chance at a trial or due process or anything like that, unless literally everyone in the galaxy was a moron. Yep, we're bringing that back from Size Matters. This is a story where the only way for its events to happen is everyone being an idiot. And that's just from the opening cutscene. There's even more contrivances later on in the game. The entire plot itself is founded on a wild goose chase for the Eye of Infinity, and every location you go to follows the same routine. Show up, face off against some generically evil non-character, and then oopsie, thank you Clank, but our Eye of Infinity is in another castle. Go play another level and do the exact same thing. Again, and again, and again. For 7 hours. So this is a full game-length fetch quest, without any of the twists or turns that made the plots in the other games so great. As opposed to those games where every level had some sort of context in the plot itself, Secret Agent Clank's story is basically popsicle sticks and glue that hold the various levels together. It's like they wanted these stages to be in the game, develop them, and then realized they forgot to link them together in the plot. So at the last minute, they wrote up this story in which events are as forced as possible so they can just get to the next level in as little time as possible. The absolute worst example of this is the entire level of Asianica. First off, Number Wu, the guy who runs the place, just leaves an obvious hint to his location, and as soon as you get there, this happens. No, I'm not kidding. Clank lands next to a bowl of electrified water, jumps out of his ship, and somehow lands in the water without seeing it. I mean, is he blind? Did he seriously not even take a cursory glance outside to see if there's any traps that Number Wu laid with such an obvious hint he left? Later on in the same level, the gadget bots just show up out of nowhere, and after freeing Clank, he sees Number Wu's footsteps on the ground. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would his footsteps just be out there in the open like this? What, was he stepping in a bucket of ink or something? Also, he literally teleported away from Clank, so even if he did have inky feet, it wouldn't even make any sense for his footprints to be there in the first place. After making his way through the level, Clank comes face to face with him and pins him to a wall with his tire rings. Clank then asks him where the Eye of Infinity is in exchange for letting him go, which he gives, and Clank then just leaves him there. After Clank gets into the ship, Number Wu breaks himself free. Wait, what the fuck? If he could do this, why did he feel the need to give him information about the Eye of Infinity when he could have just freed himself and dealt with Clank right then and there? He then tries to fire a laser at Clank as he's flying away, but it malfunctions and blows up the entire city in one foul swoop. I mean, what? So you mean to tell me the one time Clank is getting away, the laser just malfunctions so hard that it blows up the whole city? I don't even think I need to explain myself any further. In no universe would this make sense, but by this point, are you even surprised? It's pretty clear that making sense or creating a coherent plot that feels like a natural sequence of events weren't priorities here. This game has so many other examples of contrivances that serve to unnaturally move the plot along, but I think you get the idea by now. Man, I've been bitching about this story for 3 pages already, and I haven't said one thing about the mechanics of the game itself. Well, you know what they say, the gameplay is the most important part of a video game, right? While I personally think the story is utter nonsense, how is the gameplay? Spoilers, it sucks. The game still suffers from the same control issues I brought up in the Size Matters review, like the U-turns and lack of a dedicated strafe button. On top of that, the sound design is about as bad as it was before, and still has absolutely zero impact whatsoever. Take the cufflink bomb, for example. Previous bomb weapons in the series, like the mini nuke, had such impactful sound design that using them was fun in itself. However, this bomb is by far the worst one in the entire series, and it feels like you're softly underhanding wet farts at these guys. It's no fun to use because of how lame it feels. I don't know why the issues from the last game haven't been fixed, because that's exactly what a sequel is supposed to do, right? Speaking of issues from Size Matters being neglected, the combat is absolutely awful in this game because of how weak the weapons themselves are. While not to the ridiculous degree of Size Matters, the enemies still take way too long to die in this game. Most of these regular mooks can take multiple bomb blasts to take down, which is really annoying when crowds of them can dogpile you and drain your health in a matter of seconds. In addition, as I said, the controls are really bad, which includes the quick select ring. They couldn't get a 2-dimensional weapon selection ring to control well. It often selected the wrong weapon or even a gadget, because of course this game doesn't have a second ring as well, which could cause you to take even more damage. It led to several moments throughout the game where I was nearly ripping out my hair in frustration because of how bad the combat was. The spaceship graveyard was especially bad in this regard, as they just throw a bunch of enemies at you with your limited ammo and tell you to deal with it. If you die, guess who has to suffer through fighting these jackasses all over again? On top of that bullshit, the level also has this one section where you have to use Clank's jet boots to slow your descent and reach platforms far away. The issue with this is Clank's speed, which is slower than a glacier moving through a pool of molasses. Unlike Sonic Adventure 2, where you could chain your jump momentum into a hover to keep a satisfying pace up, or hell, even the previous games where you actually move through the air at a halfway decent speed, you just have to sit there and wait as Clank slowly moves over to the other platform. And if you die, you're forced to sit through it all over again. In addition, specific weapons are often required to make progress, which is really fair when you're also using them to defeat enemies, and it takes so long to kill them. The parts when you have to stop the wheels in the Tanglevine Coronation are some of the worst, as the weapon has a huge delay between when it lets you shoot, and thus forces you to wait there for 5 tedious seconds before you can proceed. I sincerely have no words for this. The worst in this regard is easily the Blackout Pen though, which isn't even a weapon, it is merely a tool for progression. You use it to black out lasers, but it only has 8 shots of ammo that can only be refilled with special crates that are rarer than Girls That Want to Date Me, and you also can't buy them from ammo vendors. This bullshit just kills the pace altogether whenever it comes up. Really, that's an issue with this entire game. Everything just takes way too long and the pacing is incredibly slow and drawn out. The thing that really exemplifies this slow pacing is the gadgets, and the new gameplay elements this game decided to add. For one, the locked door puzzle is one of the most boring in the series. These were already kinda balls in previous games because of how boring they were, but this is easily one of the worst offenders yet. You just sit there playing a cheap rip-off of Tetris, or Puyo Puyo, or whatever the hell this is. It's just so slow and they force you to do it like 3 times in each level. These colored things also feel like they should fall a little sooner, which annoyingly led to me moving this dispenser at the top, thus causing it to fall in another column and stretch the minigame on even longer. And trust me, in a game like this, that is the last thing you want, to have to play it for any longer than is absolutely necessary. But that doesn't even cover the stealth. I'll be upfront, I don't have very much stealth gaming experience. I own Metal Gear Solid 1 to 3 as well as a couple Splinter Cell games, but I haven't played them yet. The most I have is playing a bit of the first Sly Cooper. But even with such minimal experience with the stealth genre, I can still tell you that this game's stealth is, well, not good to say the least. Simply put, taking a stealthy approach drags out the pace even longer. Naturally, there's a stealth takedown mechanic, but it's absolutely atrocious. You sneak up behind an enemy, press square, which by the way is also the melee button so you can accidentally hit them and alert the entire room, and then you have to do a quick time event and watch a slow animation play out, even if you fail the button sequence. It's so boring and slow, but also the only way to kill enemies enemies without engaging with the god-awful combat mechanics. In addition, this game has barely any hiding places, nothing that indicates the range of sight on the guards, not even a minimap or radar, and a horrible camera that often gets stuck on things to boot. Also, know what really fucking sucks? Sometimes these horrible stealth mechanics are your only option. In some areas, getting caught means you die and get sent back to the last checkpoint, forcing you to relive these boring, tedious QTEs all over again. However, there is one more tool in your arsenal of stealth options, that being the holo monocle. It's basically the holo guys of this game, except you have to zoom in on a target's face and disguise yourself as them. Honestly, where do I even begin with this thing? Well, how about the fact that you have to stand still to use it and go into first person, which means you barely have a view of your surroundings, so guards can sneak up on you from behind and catch you without giving you so much as a chance to react. However, that's just scratching the surface. It's so finicky to get an image of the target's face, and you have to be perfectly, and I mean perfectly centered on them for it to work. This is so awful when getting spotted by guards causes you to die and have to rewatch shitty, slow QTE animations, and when the person you transform into can see you through your disguise. It makes using this gadget a frustrating game of slowly tiptoeing through each area and waiting for the perfect angle to magically line up, something which is a royal pain in the ass to do when the levels seem to be meticulously designed to make this as awkward as humanly possible. The worst part is, these stealth mechanics are your only other option from the atrocious combat, so you have to pick your poison. You either brute force enemies in direct combat and rip your hair out, or slow down and bore yourself to tears by inputting boring QTEs, watching slow animations, and using the barely functional holo monocle mechanic. All of these problems come ahead in the
Le paradis des tricheurs casino.
Yeah, that. This is by far one of the worst levels in the game. It has these stupid doors you can only pass when disguised as a certain enemy type. Know what that means? You have to use the piece of shit holo monocle to disguise yourself as the corresponding enemy, which is almost impossible when the level is laid out like it is here. It forces you to slowly stand around and plan your moves with extreme precision, as one slip up will send you all the way back to the previous checkpoint, and force you to wade through this god-awful gameplay all over again. Seriously, how is this supposed to be enjoyable? Also, this is a stage where a waitress just snuck up on me from behind and spotted me while I was trying to change to another disguise. What a fair and balanced video game. On top of this, the guards can randomly see you when they clearly shouldn't have been able to. This entire stage is a disaster and is the poster child for everything that sucks about this game's abysmal stealth. That's really all I have to say on Clank. On the whole, his gameplay is incredibly annoying, broken, poorly paced, and has nothing fun about it. It feels like a deliberate test of your patience and willpower. Almost like the developer's main goal was to see how long people could put up with such shitty, non-functional gameplay before descending into complete insanity. I mean no exaggeration when I say that I didn't have an ounce of fun in any of Clank's levels. I would honestly rather play all the Clank sections from the previous titles back to back over this game, because at least those had functional mechanics. But would you believe me when I say that the core Clank gameplay is only the cherry on top of the shit sundae? Yes, these regular Clank sections aren't even close to being the worst part of the game. The real problem with the game is, oh Jesus, God no, the minigames. The minigames in this game are, without a doubt, the absolute worst case of a video game identity crisis I have ever seen, as opposed to some other games I've played, where alternate playstyles can be used as a tool to expand the game's variety in a constructive way, craft interesting multi-character storylines, and just generally enrich the experience. Secret Agent Clank just feels like a grab bag of half-baked concepts that they shoehorned into the game just for the sake of arbitrary variety. This wouldn't be so bad if these extra modes were fun to play, but take a guess how they are. Just guess. Yeah, they're about as fun as having your balls shaved in public. Not one of them is enjoyable. Not even a little bit. Every last one of them is used as a means to stretch the game out as much as possible and distract from the already shallow and broken Clank levels in the most forced and, might I add, tedious way possible. This game is a melting pot of sheer anti-content, and I mean that in the worst way imaginable. First in this shit heap is Ratchet, who comes the closest out of anyone to resembling gameplay from the previous games. Here you basically play arena battles as Ratchet. Huh, okay, it seems High Impact learned their lesson from Size Matters and actually included a way to level up your weapons, right? Heh. No, you only play these sections as Ratchet, who has his own set of weapons, meaning you aren't there to level up Clank's arsenal whatsoever. So while the traditional arena battles are back in some sense of the word, the game still has the same issue as Size Matters since you aren't allowed to use them for their original purpose. I don't understand why it's so hard for High Impact to add a normal arena to these games, because it's been 2 whole games now where they somehow screwed that up. Well, at least the arenas themselves are fun to play, right? Also, no. These have the same issue as the rest of the game. The pacing is just painfully slow, making these a slog to get through. Ratchet Ratchet's weapons are also totally lacking in impact. These sections also have no relevance to the main plot whatsoever. It's part of some subplot where Ratchet is imprisoned in the whole game with a conveniently corrupt warden that forces him to fight other inmates and shit. In addition, it has some really weird shit that happens. For one, there's that cutscene in the first one where Ratchet gets thrown out of his cell to fight, but then immediately in the next shot he's right back in his cell and they hand him a weapon. There's also the part where the thug leader from Going Commando seems to think his last meeting with Ratchet was the first encounter with him on the helicopter and not, you know, the giant mech we fought to save Angela on Snivelak. Oh yeah, and there's the stage where Ratchet is in a shower, and if you get hit, his towel falls off and they put a sensor bar over his ass. That's just so juvenile and embarrassing beyond belief. Really, that's all there is to say about these Ratchet segments. They're just so pointless and a complete waste of development, when they could have made an actual arena battle for once. If you really want to waste a development though, take a look at the Captain Quark sections. These essentially take the place of the traditional Giant Clank minigames, except the game has even more of them and they're far worse than Giant Clank ever was. These minigames see you take control of Quark as he tells these nonsense stories to this random journalist guy who tags along. Quark's combat is so simple, as all you do is walk around in circles and just hold the fire button. That is it. He has a useless dodge move and some melee attacks, but all you really do have to do is move around and shoot. Because Quark is so shallow, you'd think these sections wouldn't go on for super long, right? Well, what game am I reviewing right now? Yeah, these parts are abysmally paced, and sometimes go on for 10 minutes or even more. One of the worst in this regard is the opera scene, where you do one round, the curtain closes, and then another begins. Again and again for what feels like an eternity. All the while, you're forced to listen to some of this game's amazing comedy, where Quark sings about his ass cheeks to the tune of classical music.
Here's the first verse, how I saved everyone from being food for the clam dudes. They were trying to sink the city. I jumped in to save the day. I swam right under it and plugged the leak with just my left butt cheek.
Because that isn't juvenile at all. In fact, this section is what initially caused me to pack it in and quit playing this game. It was more of a build up to this point, and after spending 10 minutes on this, I had enough and turned the game off. I wanted to do that so badly on this run by now, because this shit just goes on forever. All in all, Quark's gameplay is insanely boring, incredibly dragged out, and about as fun as getting your teeth forcibly yanked out with a set of pliers. Then we have the Gadgetbot sections. These are some of the most miserable sections of gameplay I have ever played. The Gadgetbots were never enjoyable in the Ratchet games, but that goes triple for Secret Agent Clank. Whenever these Gadgetbots would show up, I would actually scream no out loud because their gameplay is pure refuse. These sections boil down to slowly walking around, fighting enemies with incredibly shallow combat mechanics, and the most simplistic puzzles in history. Can you press buttons on a controller? Do you have the most basic level of competence at video games? You do? Well, you can solve all these puzzles. Now have fun spending nearly a half hour doing them. Oh what, that doesn't sound fun? Well, this is Secret Agent Clank, bitch. Fun or any semblance of quality ain't a priority here, Buster. The worst Gadgetbot section in the entire game is easily the one in Fort Sprocket, as it's over 20 minutes of the most repetitive, bland, tedious gameplay you can possibly imagine. And after you finish it, they ask you if you want to do optional challenges. Now all these gameplay styles have this, but optional Gadgetbot challenges in Secret Agent Clank? You'd have to be a crazy person to willingly subject yourself to such tedium. What an utter train wreck. However, none of the minigames that I just mentioned even come close to this next one. This isn't the bottom of the barrel. These broke through the barrel and dug all the way to the other side of the planet. I'm talking about the rhythm sections. Oh my god, not the rhythm sections. These are easily, beyond a shadow of doubt in my mind, the worst gameplay style in the history of the Ratchet & Clank series, and quite possibly video games in general. I can't really think of anything that's worse off the top of my head. The only thing that even comes close is the skyboarding from Size Matters, but the rhythm sections are just the slightest bit worse than that. Reason? They don't work. They just don't work. First of all, they're incredibly slow paced. The button presses aren't in sync with Clank's actions or even the background music. You just sit there arbitrarily pressing buttons as they appear, and after you're done, you watch Clank do these slow ass movements. It's essentially an extended version of those tedious stealth takedowns, because you have to watch the animations play out whether or not you failed the button sequence. Not that you know if you failed the sequence or not, since the game gives you absolutely no feedback whatsoever in this regard. I'm not kidding, sometimes you'll miss a bunch of the buttons and make it through the animations without taking damage, and other times you'll miss just one and get punished. You only find out if you failed at the end of the animation, which is incredibly frustrating. Clank goes through the regular animation, but at the end you take a hit for no reason, and it's like, how the hell did I mess that up? It's insane. I don't understand why these high-impact Ratchet games are so intent on having no player feedback, and for something like this where dying means you often get sent back to the start of these long sections, it's a fatal flaw that you have no idea how well you're doing. Even so, this wouldn't be so bad if the rhythm itself worked, but as established, it doesn't. I already mentioned how the button presses aren't synced with the music, the most basic element of a rhythm game if you ask me, but it goes deeper than that. I swear, the timing on these button presses is incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes it wants you to press them a little before the button lines up with the cursor, others it seems it has to be on point perfect, or it could even work when you press it a little too late. That's if the stars align and the button registers anyways, as most of the time I would press them perfectly and the game would just ignore it completely and say failed the input. It's almost like there's lag or something. Really fun when missing too many buttons can cause you to die and have to redo the section from the beginning, now isn't it? Often the game wouldn't even register the correct button. I would press a direction on the D-pad, but it would detect a completely different one. Also, I swear, it would sometimes detect the D-pad press when I hit one of the face buttons. Maybe it just seemed this way and I'm wrong about that. You'll just have to take my word that the game would do this. Even just the first section of this is abysmal. It goes on for what feels like forever as you just sit there and pressing buttons bored out of your skull. It's so easy to die and have to wait through all these tedious animations all over again, and this is only the first one. The second one in this dance hall is a little better, but still not fun. It has the same problem with the button presses feeling delayed, and the animations just look so cheap. It's also followed by this 6-minute long snowboarding section. Yeah, another gameplay style. You're boarding down this snowy hill, which sounds fun in concept, but Sonic Adventure this is not. As is par for the course in this game, the section takes way too long, sees you fighting obnoxious enemies all the way down the hill, and it's just a waste, as if the rest of the game wasn't already that in spades. But the absolute worst rhythm section is easily the one in the casino stage. As if that level wasn't already bad enough with the abysmal hollow monocle section, they also force you to do this long drawn out card game. By the way, I don't see how a card game is connected to a rhythm minigame, but regardless, the inputs are by far the worst here. There's 2 lengthy rounds of this nonsense, and dying forces you to redo whichever one you're on from the start. It's pain and tedium incarnate. If all of that wasn't bad enough for you, they also make you play as the gadget bots after the rhythm rounds. Twice, 10 whole minutes of doing garbage button sequences and fighting enemies with mechanics that have the depth of an Atari 2600 game. On my first playthrough last summer, this segment is what ultimately destroyed my will to continue the game, and it was the moment I realized how bad it truly was, as if the previous parts hadn't taken care of that already. This is, by far, one of the worst parts of this already atrocious game. It just goes on and on and on, completely draining your sanity while you do it. But for whatever reason, I still continued the game, and it didn't get any better from here. This game just keeps going and going and going. It seemingly never ends. All those gameplay segments I mentioned, they all drag out for at least 5 minutes each, and do nothing but distract you from the already horrible Clank sections. I know, this review is getting repetitive, but I assure you that's just how this game is. I wish I could describe this stuff in a way that sounds unique, but what else am I supposed to do with such utter trite? This game is shockingly slow-paced, end of story. There's no other place where this is apparent than the finale of the game, or what purports to be a finale. The previous games all had events that logically weaved into the ending. Even Size Matters, for as badly written as that story was, at least had events laid out in a somewhat logical order and built up to a climax. This game is just random shit happening for the sake of itself and doesn't fit together at all. The pain starts at the aforementioned spaceship graveyard, which is easily one of the worst levels I have ever played as discussed. It's here where you find out Clunk of all characters is behind the shenanigans in this game. Yeah, that fake Clank that got destroyed in Ratchet 3 somehow survived, and now he's the main villain of this game. Am I allowed to be underwhelmed? After that, you get that shitty Quark Space Nun level that goes on for what felt like an hour, and after that, oh no. Oh, no, not this again. These horrible, awful, garbage giant Clank flying levels are back in this game. It just comes completely out of nowhere, and at the end forces you to fight this stupid boss where you fly in circles and shoot it for ages. At least this part wasn't nearly as insufferable as the same gameplay style from the last game, but still, why is this here? Was this game really hurting for another gameplay mode? Did it really need to be that much longer? Anyway, after this, you're forced into another Ratchet battle where he somehow starts a prison break, even though the cutscene revealing this doesn't show any signs of the sort. It's by far the most annoying Ratchet section in the game. The camera blows, the enemies can escape, and there's these absolutely bullshit fireball attacks that can blindside you like nobody's business. Jesus man, how long has it been since the last Clank section? Who cares? After this, there's another vehicle segment in the desert, and after that, the last Quark segment. This one is easily the worst of the worst for Quark. It goes on for 20 rounds, and forces you to fight these stupid cowboy cunts that take billions of years to kill. There's even 3 of these bull dodging parts, which only drag the game out even longer. I mean, God, when will it end? By the end of this, it's been a literal hour of these horrible minigames. At least there's no rhythm sections in this part, but Christ. But that still isn't the end of it. The final level begins with yet another Gadgetbot section. This one goes on for about as long as the previous ones, and sees you doing the same puzzles again and again. Just biting switches and moving these slow platforms over and over. This one part where they make you run past this respawning crowd of enemies can also eat a fucking dick. It's yet another pace breaker and what might as well be called horrible pacing the game. Once this finally, and I do mean finally, comes to an end, you're given control of Clank for one last level, and my lord does it suck. It goes on for, no joke, joke, almost half an hour and recycles the same room designs over and over again repeatedly. The rooms are also crowded with enemies that either force you into toxic combat mechanics or abhorrent stealth, and it has multiple tedious door puzzles to boot. It's like the developers just completely gave up and said, fuck it, just throw a bunch of enemies everywhere in the same 3 rooms. And there's this one part near the end where they seem to line up enemies perfectly for the hollow monocle, almost like they knew the mechanics sucked and just didn't bother fixing it. And it's just in this last part where they actually decided to line up enemies in a favorable position. Fuck you guys. After that slog, you finally reach the last boss with Clunk, and he suddenly drops this enormous exposition dump on you out of nowhere, explaining his plan to the player like they're a toddler. He framed Ratchet for sealing the Eye of Infinity, and has it set up as a refractor for a laser that's aimed to destroy all the planets in the galaxy. He now plans to take out Clank, and then broadcast him dismantling the weapon so he can become a hero in Clank's place. Yeah, because that's a totally original plot twist. It doesn't even make any sense here, since he literally pinned a crime on Clank when he stole the Eye of Infinity back in Fort Sprocket. Yeah, now the writers can't even remember their own story details. Incredible. In general, this cutscene is really boring and dumb, but hey, at least it has the only good part of this entire game.
Ha! What a load of self-deluding garbage.
Yeah, that sums up this entire game right there. Once this is done, we engage Clunk in a battle, and I've actually heard it said that this boss was apparently pretty good. Well, I'm here to say that I disagree entirely. I think this fight sucks. To be fair, it's nowhere near as agonizing as auto-destruct from Size Matters, but that doesn't mean it's a good fight. I will admit, the idea of Clunk controlling 3 mechs is a novel one, but that doesn't mean much when the attacks are barely dodgeable with the horrible controls of this game. Your weapons do little damage, and the fight has these shitty QTEs sprinkled in that kill the pace and take away some of your health when you fuck them up. At least it gives you health refills, but damn, I just did not enjoy this boss at all. It just sucks. But unlike the rest of the game, it's at least simply bad and not literal purgatory. Once you beat Clunk, Clank tries to stop the cannon from firing but can't. It's then when Quark shows up, half naked might I add, and stops the Eye of Infinity before it can be used to destroy the galaxy. His only contribution to the main plot whatsoever. Just wow. By the way, do you remember how I said I have my own interpretation of how this game could fit into the canon of the series? Well, here it is. It's in-universe fanfiction written by a crazy person. Don't believe me? Then what else would explain this absolutely nonsensical series of events? Between those contradictions I mentioned earlier, the continuity wrecks, the plot holes like Clunk wanting to take Clank's place after framing him for a crime before, it just reeks of amateurish writing done by an edgy teen writer. This whole Quark in his underpants thing and Naked Ratchet from earlier only add more fuel to this fire, and screams to me that the only possible explanation is that this is a poorly written fanfiction in the Ratchet universe. This is the Maya Mortal of Ratchet and Clank, and I'm putting my foot down on that. Of course, that obviously wasn't the writer's intent, but in my opinion, it's the only conceivable way for this game to fit anywhere in the Ratchet and Clank canon. Anyway, after that, we get another exposition dump that's even longer than the one Clunk gives, showing that this game's story, on top of being nonsense, is also backloaded as fuck. What a mess. The game then finally ends with Clunk becoming a vacuum. Yeah, sure. And then you get to play the only fun part of the game. You become Giant Clank and you get to shoot the names of the developers. Actually a bit cathartic because of the crap they put you through in this game. Wait, what was that? Rafflecopter pilot? You gotta be fucking kidding me.
My Rafflecopter goes.
Honestly, what more can I even say about this game? This is the bottom of the barrel for the Ratchet & Clank series, and video games as a whole. I didn't have fun with a single part of this entire game, apart from the credits sequence like I just said, but literally everything else sucked balls. I thought the story was ass, and tossed itself out of the Ratchet canon within the first cutscene. The combat mechanics were dreadful, the stealth didn't work, the minigames are absolutely abysmal, the game is padded up the ass and contrived beyond belief. It's just not a good video game to me. I didn't even mention the aesthetic qualities in this review, because what's there to say when there's nothing to say? The soundtrack is forgettable save for maybe one song, and I think the graphics are ugly, especially this one part of the spaceship graveyard. I mean, fucking look at this and tell me you don't feel like throwing up. The PS2 port of this game may additionally change some things for the worse, but that version's exclusive issues are peanuts when compared to the huge gaping landfill that is this game's fundamental problems. Like Size Matters, I'm glad I didn't spend more money than was necessary to play this game, because it's an absolute failure in every sense of the word. I will never ever touch this piece of shit game again for as long as I live, and I mean that with full sincerity. With that, I'm done with the Ratchet & Clankathon. And my goodness, what a ride. I finally got to talk about one of my favorite game series, even if these last 2 videos were pure salt and negativity. The original 4 games made by Insomniac for PS2 still hold up marvelously. Yes, the first game has some problems for sure, but even in that case, these games were ambitious and incredibly successful in that ambition. I love their stories, fun characters, the universe, the explosive weapons, the satire, the expansive impressive visual design, the badass soundtracks, and the incredibly rewarding gameplay that just keeps me coming back again and again. The series dropped the ball pretty hard in its PSP outings, but that does not, and never will, take away from everything those initial 4 games did so well. It was a fun ride discussing these games. Hell, I even enjoyed making the videos on the PSP games too, even though I hated both of them. For those wondering if I'll cover the PS3 Ratchet games, maybe someday, but as I said in the intro, not right now. There's more projects I want to do, and more Ratchet is unfortunately not one of them at the moment. I just wanted to cover the games I'm passionate about, for better or for worse, in time for the series' 20th anniversary. If you want to see more from me, then be sure to stick around this summer because I have a few ideas in the pipeline. There's one video in particular I'm dying to make, and you may be able to guess what it is. I've been dropping hints here and there recently after all. I might even get back to the mainline Mario marathon if I feel so inclined. Regardless, thank you to those who have watched this video series, and I hope you stick around for what I have in store next.
Yo くね、お前邪魔。